Family, it's your favorite queer radio personality, Anna DeShawn, and this is a special, okay, I said special Queer News Live. Family, I know it's not a Monday or a Thursday, or it might be, depending on when you join us. But if you're live, we're coming live to you on Friday. And let me tell you why. You know why? Because when GLAAD reaches out and says that they've launched a new report and they say that they want to come on Queer News right here on E3 Radio, where queer news is done right, well, you know what we say yes. We say yes. We are excited to welcome Raina to the show. Raina, welcome to Queer News.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. It's a joy to be here.
I'm so glad you're here. It is so funny that we met how we did. It was meant to be, is what I'm
It
saying.
was it was meant to be. We were accidentally on the same Zoom yesterday,
It's
isn't
so
it?
such an accident. I had no idea what I was walking into. I'm just out here in the world. Who knows? And it was the perfect, perfect Zoom to land in to prepare me for our conversation. And family, before I get started, let me just tell you who Raina is out here in the world at GLAAD. Okay, she's been with GLAAD as an intern, started in 2016. Yes. And today she's the Associate Director of Entertainment Research and Analysis. So she works as the lead researcher and author of GLAAD's award winning Where We Are on TV and Where We Are in Film Studies, which measures LGBTQ inclusivity and diversity in television and film respectfully. And did I get it right?
I think so. I think you nailed it.
Okay, thanks. Thank you so much. What I love about GLAAD is the fact that you all focus on the data, that you focus on
Yep.
the research, because that is how we can actually measure impact in such a tangible way. So before we even get into this particular report, how did you even get into this work? Right.
I got into this work through an internship 10 years ago, which is nuts. I was just 22 years old. I was living in LA. My college had like a LA branch that was like spend a semester in LA, and you get an internship for credit. And I was, believe it or not, and like, how do I get into gay stuff? Because I was gender studies minor, and so I had used GLAAD. I had actually cited the Where We Are on TV report for a paper I'd written for class, and so I saw they were hiring interns, and I applied, got it, and my big task in the spring of 2016 was this report. It used to be called the Studio Responsibility Index, but you basically have to screen a lot of films for LGBTQ content, because what we do is we measure the data, but we also do a lot of qualitative analysis. So like someone has to have seen the films, provide notes on the film, enter all the data, etc. And that was me 10 years ago as a little baby intern. And it was great work. It was like really engaging. I was like, I get to watch movies. And then I was also like writing down every like homophobic joke. So it was a little disheartening at times. But
Mhm.
and then I just was honestly lucky. I moved to LA after that, and Megan Townsend, who runs our department, and who was my supervisor and still is, reached out and was like, "Hey, we're doing the next round." This was about a year later. Like, "Hey, we're doing the next round of this report. Could use an extra set of eyes." And then that became me on like a part-time gig, and then it became my full-time gig about 9 years ago. So yeah, and then I've been there ever since. So I've always been very involved. Like, these reports were how I came in, and it's what I still do, and it's been super interesting to see them evolve over the past decade, and to see them evolve, like, not just from a like, oh, I'm reading this report every year, but from being in the weeds and like, oh, I'm screening the films and I'm like seeing what has changed and what hasn't changed, and like what communities have almost never been represented, and what communities were but now aren't, and weren't and then are. So super interesting line of work to be in, and to observe that over 10 years. Whew.
100%. And what has been maybe some of the most significant changes that you've seen, since you got to watch these things as well? Is it the
I know.
content? Is it how we're showing up?
It's both. I think there's like always trends that sort of show up in every single study like over the course of the 10 years that are the same, that's sort of like the unfortunate stuff that you would expect. Like the numbers are always skewing white, they're skewing male, they're skewing cis, like no one is surprised. And then there were like there have been a few years where it's like a spike in lesbians, and I'm like, yeah. And then we've gone back down, and I'm like, no. But it's just sort of been when the overall numbers decrease, so do the numbers of like the most marginalized groups, which we see this year in terms of like trans characters and characters of color. Like it's always like those communities are like the first ones, and so it's just bummer city. But in terms of like trends that have improved and like things that have gotten better, there were just like, when I started in 2016 and 2017, and it feels not that long ago, but there was like this culture in mainstream comedy of like queer people being the butt of the joke. Like there were a lot of like bro comedies that I watched that were like, it was like, oh, I hope, like the worst thing I could imagine is having sex with another man, or like a lot of really awful like transphobic jokes, a lot of like, and these were like the big mainstream comedies. And then and obviously there's still some of that, but the sheer amount has gone down. And also a fun observation is in like, for like a last year, I think there's like a super broy, like we're guys being dudes comedy, and like as opposed to the butt of the joke being like gay people, it was like one of the bros was like this, one of them was a gay guy. Like it was like, we're all lying to our wives and he's lying to his husband. And obviously it's like not what you'd expect, but like that improvement in like 8 years was really exciting to see in such a genre you like wouldn't expect it in. And so it's been cool to see a lot of these like narrative shifts, especially in comedy, of like either queer inclusion and more like straight comedies, for lack of a better word, or like comedies from queer creators. Like we had like Bottoms a few years ago. Like, so seeing comedy in specific kind of shine is great. And also horror, like in terms of genre, like way before we started this report, like there's a really rough history of queer inclusion in horror, of like sort of like, you know, the biggest example is like Buffalo Bill, Silence of the Lambs, like really rough stuff in terms of how it affects the community and how it portrays the community. And then we've recently seen like this sort of surge of queer horror, and like we've seen it like this in movies that came out this year and in movies that were in the report last year. And then it's like there was like, they made the lead of the like I Know What You Did Last Summer reboot bisexual, and I'm like, go off, queen. And like there was that movie like The Parenting that was like, this is about like two gay guys, their parents are meeting each other and they're possessed by a demon, and the demon's homophobic but the parents love their gay kids. And there's like just cool stuff like that that's like seeing us appear in genres that we've historically been excluded from or derided in is really exciting. And that's also like still happening. Like it's not something that has fully gone away or eroded. So like that genre inclusion is really dope to see after a decade.
I think it is really dope to see. Now I ain't watching no horror film, so I'm glad you have to do it. Okay, it's not me, but I'm glad that we're being included in those storylines as well. And I think the comedic one is really, really important. You know, I'm thinking about the Dave Chappelle saga that we all lived through, right? And comedy is a cultural barometer in so many ways. And the fact that we are becoming less and less a part of the butt of their jokes, it is quite encouraging to hear that.
I think there's obviously, and I think there's, you know, a whole other conversation about like stand-up comedians, but like giving the mic or the screenplay to like the script, the computer, to like someone in the community is just like such a huge leap, because it's also like we've seen so many, like even taking out the like, you know, jokes that are homophobic or transphobic or what have you, it's like we've seen like 80 white guy comedians who are like, you'll never believe what my wife did. And it's like, what if we got something like, I think comedians who are queer have like such an interesting and cool perspective that we haven't seen in these mainstream ways yet. So like it just like makes sense that these movies and like these comedians would take off, because people want to see stuff they haven't seen before.
100%. What else am I going to the movies for? Uh, and with your report, you all are looking at 10 major studios, right?
Yeah, so we're looking at 10 studios with like the highest output US releases. So I'm gonna do this off of the top of my head. I don't have the
Let's go,
list in front of
Raina.
me. Okay, we have A24, we have Amazon, we have Apple, Lionsgate, NBC Universal, Netflix, Paramount, Sony, Walt Disney, and Warner Brothers in alphabetical order. So thank you.
Well done.
So those are the studios we look at. And a few years ago, we used to look at less and purely theatrical releases, but a few years ago we added streamers like Netflix and Amazon to the and Apple to the methodology because it's just like a reality that so many people consume movies through streaming. And we also wanted to look at sort of what the studios are putting out on streaming platforms versus in theaters, and also like we sort of break it down. So if there's a studio like NBC, that's like NBC Universal, we look at Universal Pictures, which is like the Minions or what have you, and then we look at sort of Focus Features, which is a little more like the indie branch of Universal. Like they put out like the new Downton Abbey movie last year. Like they're doing a little more like art housey stuff. They also, I believe, put out Brokeback Mountain back 20 years ago. So go off Focus Features. And then we also look at Peacock. So like what's been distributed directly onto their streaming platform. So with studios like, like a Universal or a Disney or a Warner Bros. That have multiple branches, we are looking at all of them and sort of like compiling them together into this study. So we see we're getting a little bit of everything from the major studio output. So it's not just like what's released in theaters through Universal. It's the whole package of what the company's putting out.
How many of you all work on this report? Because what I'm hearing is hours of watching. I'm hearing
Yeah, the
lots
number
of content
it
to
is
consume.
it is a smaller number than you think. It fluctuates, and yeah, and there's interns like me who help out back in the day. But yeah, there's one of my former colleagues was you mentioned horror earlier, made me laugh. One of my former colleagues, shout out Amanda, we would always assign her to watch the horror films because she's like the least squeamish person ever. And so then it's always just fun to see like what happens, but it's great. My friend my friend Enrique once, shout out Enrique, when I was just starting this job back in 2017, he was like, so you just watch gay movies all day for work? And I was like, it's a lot of data management, but yes. So feeling blessed, but also sometimes I'm like, this movie came out. There's some wild things from major studios that we don't think about, but exist.
I can only imagine. And the sheer volume of it all. When you finish one year's report, are you basically doing this push to let people know that it's out and then you're starting on the next one right away?
Essentially, we have, well, there's two big ones. There's the film and the TV. And with the TV, there's less like watching of content because we do a lot more like it would be impossible to watch every LGBTQ character on TV. So we do a lot of like communications with networks that give us their character lists, and we focus on overall trends. Whereas like in the film report, we like dive into specifics a little more. So it is kind of like TV report season, film report season, repeat, is what our team does. So
Well,
yeah.
I'm glad y'all doing the work because I think that it holds these studios accountable while also keeping us informed. Right. I think, we're living in a time where if something bad happens, then we're like, okay, we ain't shopping here no more.
Mm-hmm.
Or we're not supporting this network anymore. But when we look at a comprehensive, look at film and or television, it gives us a better sense of actually what's happening. And so how about we talk about some of the key findings of this year's report that you all just released yesterday. I think yesterday was our day, right?
Yesterday. Yeah, it was yes. I was like, this has been a long 24 hours, I'll tell you that. It's like yesterday, but yes.
Yesterday, right? Thursday, July 9th, it was released. And I mean, I think the big data that I have seen is that it has decreased again. The LGBTQ representation has decreased for the third year in a row. Is that right?
That is correct. You did your research, and so did I. But yeah, so it's down to 20.4% after 3 years
Mm.
ago. It was at a record high in 2023. And then since then, every year it's gone down a little bit more and a little bit more. So, like, that overall percentage is back down to 20. And then there's also, like I mentioned before, like specific decreases in specific communities. That's is pretty disheartening to see. So, like, there are no trans characters in this report, and like
Like
after
zero trans characters?
zero in the big major studio films. And
Wow.
then yeah, and it's that is unfortunately like consistent with when I started. It was either a trans character that was offensive in a caricature or no trans characters, and we're back there again, in a way that's really disheartening. It's yeah, and the year before there were trans characters, but they weren't portrayed very well, and it was one of them was played by a cis person, and one of them was the movie Amelia Perez. So
Oh,
don't need to say more on that, but yeah, it's
you
just
don't.
I think
Mhm.
it's very clear that what like art and the world around us are reflections of each other. And if you look at like the narratives coming out right now about like all these anti-trans bills on every level of government, including the federal one, including the Supreme Court, and like how we are using like the trans community as a wedge issue when they are people, and when everyone is like going spreading misinformation about this one community as opposed to focusing on things like, hey, why does a box of cereal cost $8? It's instead like, hey, let's specifically call out transgender people. And it's just it can feel very disheartening, and it wasn't a surprise to see this number in the study, but it was still really tough to see it. And I think what can help in sort of like in terms of looking, there are so many like trans folks who are making stuff, and if like those films might not be distributed by a major studio, but like people are super stoked on them, and like trans people have their own platforms outside of the studio system. And so yesterday, I had a conversation with the filmmaker Sav Rogers, who is made the documentary Chasing Amy, and he founded this organization called the Trans Film Center, which basically gives grants to trans filmmakers.
Mhm.
And like there's already been an inaugural cohort that has been given thousands of dollars to make their films. And then you also just like you see trans people on social media, and they're these creators have like millions of views and like an engaged following from trans people and from cis people. And so it's kind of a thing where when you look at the wider world, you're like, okay, so these mainstream films just like aren't caught up. Like they aren't on the level of where so much of culture is, because the people who are saying these terrible misinformations about trans folks are the minority. They're a vocal minority, but they are still a minority, and they're so loud right now. And I think there is an equally loud, if not louder, group that is people are trying to take the microphone away from them, but like the microphone's still there. And if it's not going to be in mainstream film, it's going to be in like on YouTube or like on Twitch, or like I sound ancient. I'm like, you heard of YouTube, you heard of TikTok, you heard of Twitch, but like it's true. It's like there is like such a network of incredible creatives who are making things like right now. And if a studio were to like look at a screenplay by a trans person, or like put more of them in their movies and things like that, like those would generate hits and be an exciting treat to the audience. But we're just trying to they just got to catch up is sort of the main thing that we're trying to put out there. But I
You
never
said,
want to be oh no,
oh, go
sorry. I never want it's sometimes presenting these findings, it's like I never want to be like, so that's it. But like I want to make sure there's context of like what's being excluded in major studios doesn't mean that those stories aren't being told. And not to mention like the indie film circuit of like what like the Cannes opening night film was a film by a trans filmmaker, like with lesbians in it. Teenage Sex and Death at Camp Miasma, which I think is coming out in August for movie, but like which is not a major film distributor on this list, but is a rising independent film distributor that's like, I'm actually going to buy this high profile film from a trans filmmaker. And guess what? It's getting so much buzz. It's winning awards. It's getting standing ovations. So I don't know, mainstream movies, maybe step it up a little.
I mean, do better. And I think you said so much in there, Raina, that I think is worth reiterating, that what's happening politically absolutely impacts what happens culturally. And one thing we do here on the podcast is we talk about politics, culture, and entertainment, because culture is always ahead of the politic of the
Hmm.
day. I don't care which party is in office, the culture is always ahead, right? Politics is always trying to catch up. And all of the anti-trans legislation that has been happening for the last since the orange man got into our orbit, okay, it has been absolutely insanity. And so I think this lack of representation from the major studios could potentially have less to do with their desire and more for their this moment where they're trying to stay off of his radar. I feel like most people, so many of these institutions are just trying to avoid being in his gaze because Trump is just unhinged. And so I think that there's so much of that that's happening as well in the midst of this, that there could be potential desire to tell these stories, but the risk seems
Yeah.
too great, I think, in some of these cases. And and the indie part of all of this is just so important. I mean, family, y'all already know. I mean, we are living in a content creator moment. This is like the Harlem Renaissance of content creation at this moment. Like everybody who wants to create can create. And I think that there's something so beautiful about that, something so powerful about that. If I meet one more person who putting their film on Tubi, I mean, everybody, you know what I'm saying? It's just it's possible to tell the stories that you want to tell, and I love that people are feeling empowered to do that.
Yeah, no, that it's incredible. Yeah, I was like, brought to you by Tubi. But I no, I think it's so great, and I think just sort of like working to remove the gatekeepers is so important, or like to show that they're not necessary or falling behind if they don't catch up. And I love what you said about culture always leading the way before politics, because I think that's so true. I think one of the most like I don't know, like mainstream white bread versions of that is and I want to say like 2000 in and during the Obama administration at some point there's like a quote, like when they were like, you know what, marriage equality is a-okay, there's like a quote from Joe Biden that was like, you know what, Will and Grace is on TV, and hey, they've done more for society than like the politics in terms of advancing the cause for gay marriage. And I'm like, yeah, like Joe Biden thanking Will and Grace, I think is like such a funny example of like the culture leading politics in that way of like, yeah, it's just so, it can be so incredibly frustrating on one end and then like inspiring on the other end, you know, of like seeing so many great people creating culture, and then also like seeing a government that is like so incredibly far behind, especially right now.
Especially right now. And I think this also leads me just to make the point that yes, this is the third year that representation has decreased, and it's not like it was high in the beginning. So Rita, when you said to me that, yeah, 3 years ago we were at our highest and it was at 28.5%, that's still 28.5%,
You
right?
know what? Say that. Yeah, it's no, that's a great point. I think it's so funny because it was like there was like this upward climb and then it kind of got cut off, if you will. So like that sort of, yeah, that 28.5 was like, and it's just beginning, and then it wasn't. So yeah, so I think it's such an interesting thing that is, yeah, it's like a fall from a high that is still, there's more to be desired and it's still imperfect. And yeah, that was just like, we're just opening up the door and then the door's shut again, you know, or the door is trying to be shut and then there's like a lot of people pushing against the door, and in this metaphor. But yeah, no, I think that's a great point, that like it's never been absolutely fantastic. And this is what we've seen in our research, especially because our team does the film and television reports, which
Sure.
see like year over year, it's like, okay, like same around the same year was a high and the same year, like, you know, declining. But like that, the television compared to film is always like TV's just knocking film out of the water. I think are high, like looking at like, because we do the TV report by characters, it was like over 600 characters at the
Wow.
highest point of that. And that is just like, this was like when Pose was on the air, when like Veneno was on the air, when like the Saved by the Bell reboot, which is a deep cut of a show that I absolutely loved. Everyone watch the Saved by the Bell reboot for really good and unexpected trans inclusion. That's my plug of the day. But there was like, I think the high hit such a higher of TV, and even TV now is still like, there are like some of the biggest shows of the past year are queer inclusive shows, and the same, and film is just not there yet. So like that disparity exists across like the whole timeline.
I think that's so interesting. I think that's so interesting. And family, let me just tell you, the rest of this report is interesting too. And you should go look at it because Raina worked real hard on it.
I really did. I watched so many movies. I was like, I feel like I'm like here to talk about the report and keep going off topic. And you're like, anyway, the report. And I'm like, right. But yes, there's so much in there. There's also like, there's a statistics that I've been spouting off. And then there's also like, it goes into each studio chapter by chapter, and like a couple films are highlighted and like overall trends are noted. So if you're interested in that kind of stuff and sort of like looking at like what films did really well representationally, because I also just want to be like, it's not like just because the numbers are down doesn't mean there's still not great stuff being made. So there were really good films within that 20%. So you can read all about them and sort of see what's going on at that handy link that Anna just put on the screen.
Yes, I'm just trying to help you. I'm trying to
I
help
know
you.
you're helping me so much.
As our Uncle Otis would say. And family, we want you all to be informed, and that's why we do the show. That's why Queer Niggas is so incredibly important, because we can just talk about queer things all day long, and I love it. Okay, and us being aware, right, of the films and the studios that are creating work that are centering our characters, it's important. It's important for us to know because we want to support those who support us, right? So please visit GLAAD.org/2026 dash where dash we dash r dash n dash film. Okay. And find the report. I think it's important for us to read the data. It's important for us to know this information. And we thank Raina for doing this for the last 10 years and watching a whole heck of a lot of films and television and content, my friend. Thank you.
Hey, thank you. Thanks for having me on. I love talking about this stuff, and you have such a great interview style. I feel so comfy and great talking to you. So it's been a blast, and I hope more folks read the report, stay informed, be armed with the data whenever you can.
That's it. That's it, family. Be armed with the data, okay? Now, y'all already know what to do. You're going to go to the link, visit the report, download it, tell a friend, just be informed. That's what this is about. Raina, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me. It's been a joy.
Of course, of course. And family, you already know this is what we're doing here on Queer News. Yes, so tap in. We're live Mondays at 7 p.m., Thursdays at noon. If you're not already subscribed, go subscribe to our Substack. Yes, queernewspod.substack.com. I just dropped Pride on full display at the Obama Presidential Center. So if you plan on visiting the OPC soon, you got to download my checklist so you don't miss one queer thing, okay? I just really didn't know how much queer history and how many LGBTQ artists have contributed not only to the museum, but the entire campus, okay? So go to the Substack, check out the most recent post, because I really think you get down with it. And then also, don't forget, we got the CLBD, and we rocking it, okay? The Chicagoland Lesbian Business Directory. Over 90 plus lesbian-owned businesses are on this list. All right, we highlight 10. Join the Q crew. Yes, to access the entire database. Because if you're tuned into this, I know you support LGBTQ stories, you respect and love how I report in the news, and $5 a month, that's less than a coffee. You feel me? But it go a long way to support this work. So I hope y'all continue to tune in, tap in, because we are Queer News done right.